Good morning. Welcome to my Battle Royale screencast. I think what I'm going to start with is the Latimer and Campbell text, the Beyond Five paragraph essay. I'm going to start with this text and just very briefly discuss where I feel its strengths are. I'm starting with this text because it's the text that I feel like I took the least from. But I will say that I do like the concepts it discuss. I like this idea of kind of taking a step back from direct instruction, taking a step back from emphasis on the tools and techniques and the tasks itself, and really focusing on deeper thinking, making connections, and providing students kind of a freedom to approach a text and take away from it whatever it is that they're meant to take away from it, um, by sort of providing them that space and taking a step back from over instruction, um, and kind of stepping away from like the mold and stepping away from the very specific steps and processes and allowing the students to kind of develop their own processes. I really do like that idea. Personally, I don't feel like there's a whole lot in this text in terms of how specifically to implement that. And so, as a new teacher, I feel this would be a bit intimidating. Great concepts, but how? That's kind of how I feel. Especially because I'm with seventh graders. I feel like seventh graders are in need of some of that direct instruction. Seventh graders need some of those fundamental skills that this text seems to suggest are unnecessary or even limiting students from making their own um, uh, meaning and developing in their literacy skills. So there's that. Gallagher is the next text I'm going to go over. Gallagher was huge in my success as a student teacher this year, and I feel I owe Gallagher for passing the TPA, Gallagher and Ginsburg, of course. But I will say I appreciate Gallagher because I love that I feel like his model is very similar to the ERWC, in that there's a lot of emphasis on building background knowledge. There's a lot of structure. There's a lot of very specific scaffolds. He provides a lot of insight in terms of how to guide students through initial readings, how to support them to make deeper meaning in second readings. Approaching the text several different times. And what I love about Gallagher is in these texts, first of all, the texts are really, really easy to read. I like the way that they're organized. And I love, love, love that he actually provides templates of a lot of his activities and a lot of his scaffolds and graphic organizers in the text. So there have been several that I have implemented in my own classes, sort of taken them almost directly out of the book and sort of um, designing them to fit whatever text I'm reading with my students. Of course, the students are always very, very engaged when we're doing this kind of work. It does help them to stay engaged with the text. It has been successful in helping them to comprehend the text, but in terms of making deeper meaning, what I've found is that these graphic organizers and these supports can sort of do that deeper thinking for the students. So in terms of comprehension, awesome. Engagement, great. They're busy. They're discussing the text. They're doing some thinking around the text, but the deeper thinking is being done for them. The probing questions are being asked for them. And I think ultimately our hope is that the students are learning how to ask those questions themselves, how to do that deeper thinking on their own without having to be guided and prompted. That's where the Vinton text comes in. So I emailed you after reading about halfway through, just letting you know how much I really appreciate this text, because I think as a new teacher, I experienced a lot of anxiety around this concept of feeling like a fraud. Like, I know that my students are going to have questions for me that I may not have the answer to. I know that I want them to do this deeper thinking, but I don't know necessarily how to encourage them to do that. I don't know how to facilitate that. But this text put a lot of that anxiety to rest for me. At the end of the day, answering their questions isn't making them better readers or writers or better thinkers. This text helped me to realize that I am actually doing a disservice to my students by being the keeper of all of their answers and guiding them through a very specific approach to text and helping them to make deeper meaning by making it for them, right? And so this text helped me to kind of embrace my lack of experience and also helped me to realize that all of us approach text with our own questions and our own level of ability, and what makes us better readers and better writers and better thinkers isn't having the answers to those questions, but embracing the questions that we have, acknowledging when we have questions, like recognizing when we're confused, when we have questions, then embracing those questions. And finally, engaging in thinking processes in order to find the answers to those questions, right? And so I think that this text does a good job, first explaining that, and then secondly, guiding teachers through what that process looks like in instruction. Okay, so just a few of my favorite things from this text. First of all, there's a lot of emphasis on what successful discussion around texts look like. And I think that as a new teacher, I myself am very guilty of being afraid of silence. There's nothing in the world worse than reading text with a class and then looking out at a sea of blank stares, right? Just like immediately like this feeling of failure, like they didn't get it, I'm screwed. Often I respond to that silence, or I try to fill that silence desperately by asking them questions, usually yes or no questions, and or providing them the insight that I was hoping that they would glean from it, providing them with the meaning that I was hoping that they would have made on their own, or the connections that I was hoping they would have made on their own. So ultimately, just giving them everything I was hoping that they would have taken from it. This text walks teachers through guiding discussion in a way that really encourages students to make their own meaning, right? Gives very specific insight on the types of questions we should ask. Mentions specifically when we should be quiet. You know, it talks about embracing the silence and not being afraid of the silence and biting your tongue when a student's almost there and you just want to push them to make that connection, but kind of holding back and allowing them to kind of struggle just a little bit, and giving them that opportunity to kind of engage in their own thinking processes. I love what this text says about noticing and naming, because again, it takes the emphasis away from the answer and instead shifts the attention on the process, right? So when a student, it's not about right or wrong answers. It's about students progressing and students engaging with text. So when they make a text-to-text connection, notice that and name it, right? Make it explicit. When they recognize how this text from the 18th century is relevant today, notice that and name it, right? Make it explicit. I love that the focus on this text is not necessarily on having all the answers. It's instead of how we can help students to grow and develop as readers, as writers, as thinkers. And yeah, those are my two favorite things about this text, this concept of noticing and naming, and this guidance in terms of how to walk students through discussion around a text that encourages them to find the answers on their own, as opposed to filling the silence with comments or insight or connections that if given a little time, the students would have been able to make on their own.